All right. You notice I have the wrong date on there. This is the same slide cover that I used at January 28th last year. I just changed the date on it and changed the title, but everything else is the same. I forgot to change the day. Stone.
Stone. Push the stone.
There's no D at the end, at least this time of day. So as background, I'm just going to give you a real quick cap of what I presented last year, very quick. So energy efficiency in affordable. Sorry. Oh, I'll let you say that. Okay. Energy efficiency in affordable housing is not just about saving the energy. It has an awful lot to do with the health of the occupants, the financial security for them. A price shock is a bigger deal for affordable housing tenants than the higher prices themselves are, and community economic activity. And it's too long to go into why on that, but if you go back and pull up my slides back from last year, you'll see all the details on it. Income gap in the United States is worse than any other industrialized country, and it's getting wider by the year. The rich are getting richer on the backs of the poor and the middle class. So this problem that we have with affordable energy and affordable housing is not getting better naturally. We need to deal with it. I just pressed down. There we go. All right, next slide.
Next slide.
So I want to cover a few things. One is, well, what's the state doing about this? And one of the biggest things for affordable housing in a long time was a package in 2017 called the Housing Package. 15 bills focused on trying to help solve the housing problem. I'm not going to go through what each one of these are. You can actually look up 2017 housing package and find more details than I have in here. But I do want to go through a little bit of a couple of them. So first off, that all of these housing packages are expected to increase the production of affordable housing by a little bit more than 14,000 units per year. Next slide. You see that that's kind of a drop in the bucket. Yeah, it's helpful, but it's not going to be nearly enough. And unfortunately, most of the focus on improving on dealing with the shortage of housing is dealing with the housing that's more lucrative to build, the expensive housing, and the larger subdivisions. It's not dealing nearly as much with the affordable housing. This legislation deals mostly with the affordable housing, but the attention that you see in the paper on housing is not about that typically. So of those 15 bills, only one, next slide by the way, only one mentions anything related to ZNE. My topic here is supposed to be, well, ZNE and affordable housing. What are we doing here about it? This housing package doesn't really do much about it. The only thing mentioned in any of those 15 bills is local planning, city and county planning has to include energy efficiency as part of the planning process, and that's about it. That's these bills are not trying to get this affordable housing to be this additional housing to be more affordable on a monthly basis, just more affordable in terms of the basic rent. That's not a bad thing to be dealing with the rent, because the rents that's a nasty issue, but that's not the whole thing. As a real good friend of mine used to say, don't you dare call it affordable housing if they can't afford the utilities. Not being able to afford utilities is one of the primary reasons for a family becoming homeless. So if you look at the next slide, slide 7 on what it shows on here, I think it's important to think about who we're building the housing for. Are we building it for the young family, or are we building it for the next group of folks that we need to house? And in California, we're going to have a larger increase in population, a higher percentage increase in population of, me, old folks, people that are past the working age. And should be retiring, whether we are or not. So we need to be thinking about, well, what works in terms of housing for them, and accessibility obviously is one of those issues, but comfort is another one. You know, the older you get, the less able you are to deal with significant comfort temperature changes. All right, next slide. So a lot of the focus on ZNE, since we've been talking about it for over 10 years, has been on new construction. And I think it's important to note that out of 100 homes that will be available in California on December 31st, 99 of those were here January 1st. We're building about 1% of our housing stock every year. We have to deal much more with the existing housing stock if we want to be serious about getting to ZNE, and we want to be serious about climate change. So what kind of housing? Go to the next slide. Multifamily housing currently represents a little less than a third of all our housing, and except for last year, since the Great Recession, we've been building more multifamily than single family. Last year, it kind of flipped, but not by much. It's still like 51-49%. We need more multifamily housing, partly because we're getting more people, and as far as I know, California is not getting any more land. So we're not going to be able to just keep building the sprawl out farther and farther. And with the multifamily that we have and that we're building, a little over 11% of it is deed restricted, and it's a lot easier to imagine how to deal with, for me anyway, it's easier to imagine how to deal with getting to ZNE and increasing energy efficiency in the deed restricted homes, because you can make it part of the requirement. You know, if you want our money, part of the deed restriction is you've got to meet this threshold in terms of energy efficiency. Unfortunately, it's not always easy to get the policymakers to agree that that's the focus. I work an awful lot with the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, and what I'm used to hearing from them is we're a housing program with we're a housing program with an energy element. We're not an energy program with a housing element. Or if you take a look at the low-income households in California, out of the 3.3 million low, very low, and extremely low income households, over 50% of them are paying over 50% of their income for rent and utilities. And what's considered affordable in terms of rent and utilities is 30% of your income. And these households are paying over half of their income for rent and utilities. And when we talk about rent, we typically mean what the property owner takes from the tenant. The deed restricted programs, tax credits, HUD, etc. When they talk about rent, they're talking about gross rent, which is what we think about as rent plus the cost of utilities. So that's the figure that they're looking for. 30% of utilities, excuse me, of income should go for housing, rent, and utilities. Yes.
Yeah, what are the colors?
I'm sorry?
What's the legend?
You know, you guys can see more of my slide than I can because of this thing at the bottom here.
Yeah.
And I got to put my glasses on.
So blue is rent.
I'll get back to you on that.
Yellow is red.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I believe that the green. I believe that green is the utilities, blue is the rent, and yellow is all else that they spend on. But I'll have to get back to you on that because I can't. It's what?
Maybe yellow.
No, above moderate income is showing yellow.
Okay.
And it's getting worse. You know, we if you take a look at the next slide here, you see that average rents are going up at a pretty significant general pace, whereas real income has actually fallen over time. And the rents in California, in that lower right-hand graph, over time, they've gone up significantly, and they're going to keep going up because people want to live in California. I mean, that's what affects housing prices more than anything else, is the desirability of the location. All right, so the next slide, Title 24, what's that doing about all of this? Well, 2019, and I'm not going to go into much detail because you got an expert here who will be speaking after me, but 2019 was a step towards ZNE. It's I call it partial ZNE, just like we had zero emissions vehicles, and then we have partial zero. What's a partial zero? My math told me take any number, multiply it by zero, you still have zero. So I don't, so we have partial ZNE for low-rise residential. It includes multifamily, and it provides for allowances if there's not enough roof space or the site shaded or something like that. So I wouldn't call them, Mossy may disagree, but I wouldn't call them exemptions. They're kind of allowances, and the idea is to get as much as you can, but you're not going to break the bank. So for 2022, we're looking at some major changes in Title 24. I don't know why I came out of Title 23. That's my fingers. It's going to be focused more on greenhouse gas than it has in the past, and a little less on pure energy efficiency than it has in the past. And multifamily is going to be treated more on a par with other building types. Right now, the analysis is done on single-family homes on what's cost-effective, and the code for single-family homes is developed that way. Cost-effective analysis is for commercial buildings is done on certain types of commercial buildings, and the code is developed that way. And then it's applied to multifamily, both sides, the single family and the commercial code. So we have a commitment from the Energy Commission that for the 2022 standards, we're going to actually look at what's cost effective for multifamily buildings and write the code for multifamily buildings, which I think is a huge step. And there's also a possible next step towards ZNE. Other California state activities, the Energy Commission is supporting the move towards ZNE a lot through its research grants, the EPIC grants. 25% of the demonstration projects under the EPIC grants have to be for disadvantaged communities. Another 10% has to be for low-income households outside of the DACs. And we have a current project, which you're going to hear about from Amy, that Sean's involved in, AEA is involved in, Lonnie, who's not here, is involved in. That Build a Green is running. That is, I believe, going to provide a lot of the information that's necessary, both for ZNE and for multifamily code. The PUC's ESA program is moving forward. As this says, it's hardly ZNE, but it's getting better. It's improving. Community Services and Development has a LIWIT program operated by AEA, and that's moving even farther towards ZNE. It's the first program in California I know of any substantial funding that has been able to combine energy efficiency and PV in the overall package and make it something that actually works for multifamily building owners. It's cap and trade funded rather than ratepayer funded, so it doesn't have the same restrictions as the utility programs do, but it also means that its funding is a little sketchier as the cap and trade funds go up and down. TCAC has ZNE scoring. Sean developed the technology for the ability for on the competitive points for people to be able to get their energy, energy efficiency score for their points towards the lucrative 9% tax credits by showing how far they get towards having the tenants be zero net energy. And the farther you get towards making your tenants zero net energy, the more points you get. You're asking what TCAC is?
No,
Oh.
I'm just going to give you shit about the fact you need a red card thrown on you for acronyms. ESA.
WTF?
Holy shit.
So I tell you what, I've got this thing at home called a jug. I'll bring it for you next time. Jargon User's Guide.
So I can throw it at you?
Yeah.
No, you can throw money now when you
Next slide.
Next slide. Realize project. This is another project I'm involved in that's EPIC funded. How many people have heard of the Dutch model of energy sprong? So if you take a look at that picture down at the bottom, you know, it's kind of a funny conceptualization for it, but it's basically taking out of the can or off the shelf technology and bringing existing housing to zero net energy. The goal is to be able to get in and out of the project in less than 3 weeks, to get it to true zero net energy, and to use off the shelf technologies. What we're going to be working on as soon as the funding comes through and we all have contracts is developing packages of measures that are replicable, that you can take to different neighborhoods, just go down the row and do it. The project's led by Project Silicon Valley, Rocky Mountain Institute, and the Association for Energy Affordability. And you can look up more about it on the Energy Commission's EPIC website. So another change for affecting affordable housing in ZNE is the electricity tariffs. Most of you are probably aware that in 2019, the IOUs are all going to go to default time of use tariffs. So what that means is if you live in the area of one of the IOUs, that you will no longer have block rate as your default. You can still go back to block rate if you've got good reasons to, but otherwise you're going to be on time of use. Wayne Wade, a friend of mine who used to be at HUD and then was with a solar company for a while, and then CHPC, California Housing Preservation. It was Preservation. What is it now? Housing Partnership Corporation. Did an analysis of, well, what does this mean for people in affordable housing having to go to TOU rates? And you know, if you got money from utilities to put solar on your roof, it's no longer, the TOU will not just be a default, it's mandatory. You don't have a choice. You will be on time of use rates if you got money to put solar on. Well, the PUC wrote an exemption for low income households because Wayne was able to show that, you know, for too high of a percentage of households, that's going to put them in a very negative position. They're going to be paying more of their scarce income than they were before because they can't shift load. They can't, you know, say, all right, kids, none of you can wash or take showers or do anything like that between these hours. It's just not going to happen for a lot of low-income households. So they got an exemption. However, with virtual net energy metering and with devices to help households understand and control how they use energy, I believe that virtually every affordable house, low-income household will actually benefit from time of use rates if they have solar on the roof. This quote at the bottom was from somebody, and this article was in Scientific American. It's about Spring Lake, and the quote in the bottom. I want to read it out loud, but I can't because this doggone thing is blocking part of it.
I was always scared when the bill would come. And it was either really hot or really cold. She said adding at the minimum or old utility bill would be $100. In total, in the 5 months we have been living here, this come out under $30 total. So just so that you know, you're charged $5 a month just for the privilege of being charged $5 a month. So that 5 months, $30. That means she paid $1 a month for her actual use. And you know, so with solar, with good design, zero net energy homes, I believe that the low-income households should be on time of use rate. I don't think we ought to put everybody on time of use rates because not everything gets to ZNE. All right, last thoughts. So what's missing? There's a bill on the a proposition on the ballot this fall for rent control to try and make it more affordable to rent in California.
And a lot of my friends are in favor of this bill. CHPC came out in favor of it. A lot of folks came out. It's the stupidest idea in the world. Rent control, what it does, it stops people from developing, and you end up with a greater housing shortage, which makes the problem worse. How about a Gini index for housing? How many know what a Gini index is? So for those that don't know, essentially what it does is it takes a look at the full scale of, I'm going to talk about income first and then apply it to housing. So it takes a look at the people who make the most money and people who make the least money, and how many people are in which of those brackets. And if you have a Gini index of 0, that means everybody makes the exact same amount. Nobody makes more than anybody else. If you have a Gini index of 1, that means that one guy makes all the money and everybody else makes nothing. So, essentially you want the Gini index as low as possible. And across the world, the Gini index for income is somewhere around 0.38 on average. In California, it's 0.52, I think it is. And in the United States, it's about 0.48, 0.49. Not that great. Well, Gini index for housing actually tells us just the opposite. If Gini index for housing would mean that you were going to look city by city, and the cities that have the worst Gini index are actually the best for affordable housing, because it means you have housing at all points in that scale. It's not all it's not all at $500,000. It's not all at $100,000. You have housing that people everywhere in the economic scale can afford. So if we had a Gini index for housing and we looked at everywhere, all the cities, we'd be able to figure out what are the affordable places. One of the things that keeps me up at night, as we're moving towards all electric homes, and that's a good thing in terms of reducing carbon and saving the planet. One of the things that keeps me up at night is that the parallel to the original energy crises we had in California in the 70s. Those crises happened because we were essentially a petroleum economy. Our entire fleet ran on petroleum, and most of the power plants ran on petroleum. So when OPEC decided, okay, we're going to teach you a lesson, we learned the lesson, and we learned it hard. There was long lines, there was blackouts, it was just all sorts of problems. Well, if we move to an all-electric economy, we are putting ourselves at a similar kind of vulnerability. And the Russians have already demonstrated that they know how to hack into our electric system and hack and things that can control our grid and some of our power plants. Beyond that, we have terrorists, and their recent paper showed that if terrorists plotted out 12 spots to blow up power plants, they could bring the entire East Coast to a standstill, and most of it would stay blacked out for 3 weeks. Well, that part of it, yes, but the last one, solar storms. It would not take a 500-year solar storm to knock out the electric grid. It could do it very easily. All right, so I get to my last point. Anybody seen what these things are? It's called a splat. The kids buy these and they throw it down and it splats out and then pops up as a ball again. My demonstration is differently. We're working on zero net energy homes, right? So we're going to squeeze that energy down. Well, guess what? If we're not careful, that energy comes up in transportation. And zero net energy homes that are 50 miles away from work are not any more energy efficient than a 50% efficient home that's right close to work, where you can walk to work. Take a look at the next slide. If you take a look at what housing affordability is, and then you layer on top of that the transportation related affordability that's next to it, we have a lot of counties where on average it is not affordable. You can get an affordable house in Imperial County, but by the time you've driven to work, you've spent 65-70% of your income. Well, that's not really helping folks. So we need to not get siloed on just the ZNE building, but we need to think about how do we make sure those buildings are where people need to live and can afford to live. All right, last slide, just because, and I thought I was the last presenter tomorrow before I figured out I'm not. So this is a little bit wrong, but anyway, I just like to leave people with a smile.